Guys, we're going to be kicking off a new series today in the book of James. I'm really excited about this one. And we're going to spend just a good amount of time kind of in this book of the Bible. And this was actually the very first book of the Bible that I ever learned or was taught. And so we're going to run into kind of that whole framework. So if you're maybe here and you would say, hey, Ryan, like this whole thing is really, really new to me. I don't know where to start. I've never read the Bible. Let me just help you. You can feel at home here. That was my experience. I had no interaction with the Bible whatsoever until I was in college. And literally, I started right here. And I turned out okay, right? So you can too, right? This is good. So here's what I'd encourage you to do. If you don't have a copy of the Bible, like a physical one like this, you can take one from underneath the chairs there. You can write your name in it, take it home with you, make it your own. And then throughout the kind of the course of this series, what I'd love to have you do, if this is your first time interacting with the Bible, or if you've interacted with the Bible since you were small, is to begin to read this book over and over again. So just start to read here, and then we'll talk about it on the weekends, right? And as questions comes up, maybe we'll address some of those. But start to dig into it and start to see God's word kind of from a fresh lens. And this is where we're going to be here for the next several weeks. And so highly encourage you to jump into that. Really what James is all about is he's very honest, he's very blunt, and really what he focuses on is putting our faith into action, right? When it goes beyond just hearing some stuff and like checking, like, yes, I believe that, I would check a box and say, sure, I believe Jesus died for my sins. It's all the now what. If that's true, what does that look like in life? How does that alter me kind of in the deepest levels? Kind of like we heard Aaron talk about today, talking about that the priority of Jesus being the Lord of my life and what that starts to do to all of my decisions. We're going to dive into that and really start to see how that plays out here in the book of James. And in the first few verses, James would identify himself, say James, right, servant of God, Lord Jesus Christ. And James is going to be, this James is almost certainly the brother of Jesus, right? So if you can imagine what it would be like to grow up with Jesus as your brother, that would be awful in some ways, right? Every time you got in trouble, it's your fault, right? Every time. Jesus never does anything wrong. And so Jesus is, of course, going to be grown up with family with James. And it tells us a ton about who James is, that he would be able to have the humility and the perspective and the faith and the wisdom to look at Jesus and say, that's my Lord. The brother that I grew up with, that's the Lord Jesus Christ. I follow him, and everybody else should too. And he recognizes that Jesus is the God-man. He's fully human and fully God, and follows him as such. And he's writing to a group of people that are kind of all spread out, Jews that are followers of Jesus that are spread all throughout kind of the Roman Empire. But all of these teachings that we're going to look at are going to apply directly to us. And he has a pretty hard-hitting intro here. You're going to jump in right here in verse 2. And this is literally the first verse I ever learned in the Bible, right? So I said yes to Jesus when my friend led me to Christ on a road trip. And then eventually I would come to a Bible study of a bunch of college students. And this is where we started in the book of James, verse 2. So here it is. Ready? James 1:2, hard hitting. Here's what he says. He says, hey, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. He says, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Right? So right out the gate, James is like, hey, you having a hard time? Consider that joy. It's awesome, right? He just kind of throws it right in the very beginning, right? Kind of a punch in the face moment. And here's what James recognizes, right? Something that we all kind of know and experience is he's like, hey, you're going to have difficulties in this life, right? You're going to have difficulties. And there's a bunch of reasons why we're going to have difficulties. They come from all kinds of different places. Difficulties happen, right, in short, because we live in a fallen, broken, sinful world where bad things happen, right? It's kind of the reality of our experience. So if you're here and you're considering following Jesus and you're hoping like, man, maybe I can choose to follow Jesus and he'll make all my problems go away, I've got bad news for you, right? That's not how this thing works, right? The bad things never happening to you is not how life works on this side of heaven. There is a day coming when that will be the case and all that will end and go away. But this side of heaven, difficulties are real and they're pretty abundant. What we find is this, is James going to say, hey, you know the difficulties that you experience. What I want you to recognize about that is that there are different ways to view these things. And I don't know about you, but here's how this tends to work for me, is when I'm in the midst of a trial or a difficulty, what tends to happen is I tend to put my focus on getting out of the situation, right? When I'm in a situation that I don't want to be in, I don't like this, I don't want it to change. Sometimes those difficulties are changeable, and that's real, and that's fine. Most of the time, they're not. Most of the time, we're kind of in the situation that we're in, and we're probably going to be there a little while, right? This financial struggle, maybe it's a thing we're in for a little bit, and we can work our way out of it, but we're kind of in it right now. There's no magic wand that we can wave and make it go away. And so usually what happens is there starts to be kind of a circling around this thing where I just start to think about my difficulties all the time. I wish that they would go away. I maybe wonder why they are here. I look around at other people and think, why don't they have difficulties like I do? All right. And then there's just a focus on making the difficulty not difficult. James is going to say, hey, how about instead of doing all that, you chose to do something different? Instead of spinning on how terrible it is and how much you wish it was different and how other people don't have to do the things that you are stuck doing, why don't you instead choose to recognize the difficulty of the situation and do something with it? I can view this thing with a completely different lens. And there's a range, kind of a range of reality that I can experience that helps me to move forward. But I got to break out of this circle first. Break out of the circle of trying to get out of it, and I just have to deal with the fact that I'm in it. And he's going to say, hey, this difficulty that you're in the middle of, there's actually enormous good that can come out of this. There's enormous good that can come out of this, right? Here's what he would say, right? He says, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, right? You know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. He says, what's going to happen is this arrow right here, where I recognize the difficulty itself probably isn't that good, right? We just heard in Aaron's story, car accidents and breaks, but probably there's many things that aren't necessarily good in and of themselves, but what comes from them can be extremely good, right? It can be life-changing, game-changing, faith-sparking, right? This right here, ultimately, James is going to say, hey, this right here is where the good stuff is. So what I want to do is I want to consider pure joy what comes out of these difficulties, because this is going to lead to maturity. If I go through this the right way, I can land in a place where I am different, where I become something different, where I grow into what Jesus is already trying to make me into. And it happens through this. I loved in the story where we heard Aaron say this. He's like, there was no other way to get into these parts of my heart except for these difficulties to come. Like the supernatural wisdom that he just shared with us blew my mind. That's why I wanted to make sure this conversation happened today, that you heard the story, because he's seeing it, right? Nothing great about this, the unique circumstances that that he is in or that we are in, but we can find an enormous amount of maturing and transformation and growth that happens when we involve God in this and we find him kind of in and through it, right? When we let perseverance finish its work. I have the ability to endure because this exists. Now, at the same time, we want to recognize that the honesty and the reality that on the other side of this spectrum is that these things are hard, right? That life can be very hard. It can be excruciatingly hard. And what I find over here is I can break out of kind of my self-pity, and I can just be honest and bring this directly to God and say, hey, God, this thing is hard. And when I do this, what I find is I find an enormous amount of comfort. I can go directly to him and find a comfort that he sees and he knows and he understands and he's with me. When I go over here and I recognize that there's good that will come from it, that none of this is wasted, he's going to use it and it's going to lead to something that where I am altered. I become more like a person of Jesus, and there is joy here. I can land, as long as I'm in this bar of reality and I include this portion of the story, massive stuff starts to take place. But I got to recognize, right, that what's going on here with the difficulty. And usually in our experience, this is how this works, is we just kind of find ourselves in the middle of the difficulty and we can't really see the rest. I'm just in the thick of the thing that I don't want to be in. And it doesn't make sense, and I don't understand where it's leading. I don't know where this thing is taking me. I don't know where it came from. It's happening just kind of to me. I don't know what to do with it. Makes me think of my son. He's 17. He's a basketball player, right? Finished going into his senior year. And probably about 5-6 years ago, he said, hey, Dad, I really would like to get good at basketball. Like, he was kind of beginning to play and starting to get involved, and he's like, can we find a place where I can play with other guys that are good and get around some guys that are like trainers and can help. And what happened was, it was a really neat story. The Lord kind of connected us with this guy who actually used to play pro ball overseas, and he was like, hey, there's this thing, it's super cheap. We all kind of gather up and we train, and it's going to be amazing, and your son can totally come. He'll love it. I was like, okay, cool. And I should have known when he told us the name of it, that it was going to be a little bit different. He's like, yeah, it's called the Gauntlet. I was like, that's an interesting name, right? We'll see what this is like. So we show up, and it's in this weird, dark, dingy church gym basement thing, and it's super hot. And there's all these kids, and it was like, here's what it felt like. It was like somebody sat down and thought, what's every possible exercise I could ever think of? And we're going to put all those in a massive circuit, and we're going to have the children do it until they throw up, right? It's like if you did that. And that's about what it was, right? And so I remember going to it, and I was like, I think this is safe. We'll see, right? And the kids start doing it, and there's 20 or 30 kids, and they would do Gauntlet. They'd do one big cycle, and then they would do it again. And all the kids, they're 11, 12, so they're awkward and sweaty and stuff anyways. And so they're all kind of half passing out, and it's insane. I tried to do it once. I was on the verge of throwing up about 3/4 of the way through one circuit. And I was like, I'm done, right? I'm not going to be a basketball player. I'm not going to do this. So they do Gauntlet. They do the whole thing. And the guy who invited me, his son was a part of it. My father-in-law walks into the middle of the Gauntlet, right? He's going to pick my son up after practice. And he walks into the middle of this thing. He doesn't know the guy that invited us. He doesn't know his story. He doesn't know the intentionality that went into creating all this and training all this. He just walks into the middle of this insane thing that looks like a torture chamber for children, right? And he's like, I don't know if this is a good idea, right, for our son to be in the middle of this thing. And what happened was, as he started to understand the design and he started to understand the outcome, it started to make more and more sense. We can fast forward today and look at that group of kids that trained in the gauntlet, and the guy who designed it, he's with the Lord now, good friend. His vision is his intention for his son was that he would make them into wonderful, great athletes and basketball players. The kids who persevered and hung in there and kept doing workouts like that, there's like 7, 8, 9 college basketball players coming out of that group that was doing that, right? 6, 7, 8 years ago, whatever long it was. He had the vision. He knew what would come from the difficulty. He knew that if you want maturity, you've got to go through difficulty. If you want to become this kind of athlete, you've got to have the trials that come through training yourself to become somebody that can withstand high pressure and high athleticism. James is kind of looking at us saying the same thing. He's saying, hey, you are a group of people that said, I want to be like Jesus. I want to be like Jesus. I want my life to be defined by God. I don't want to be a slave to sin anymore. I want to be set free from this. And I believe Jesus has done this for me. He says, hey, if you're going to become like Jesus, you're going to move towards a place of maturity, you have to understand that what God does is he doesn't waste any of the difficulties that we're going to find ourselves in. He actually is able to bring unbelievable good out of them. Hear me. We're not saying that the individual trial is good. We're not saying that a car accident or a disease or a relational conflict, we're not saying that stuff is good. We're saying God, in his goodness, has an unbelievable ability to redeem and to use everything that we find ourselves in the middle of to make us something different. If you look at the people around you, if you find somebody who is deeply mature and gentle and humble and strong in their faith, and they love Jesus and they love people, and you look and say, man, I want to be like that one day, I guarantee you, all of them would look back and say, oh, I can tell you all kinds of stories. I've been through the gauntlet. And I'm still going through the gauntlet. And he's still changing me. And he's still making me. And there's no this without this. But James would say, hey, make sure to see this. Because if I don't see it, I might not maximize this for this outcome. I might kind of waste it in my own experience. I might land in this place where I just spin my wheels, burn time, and just wonder why all the time. And here's what he's going to say, right? The next passage, he says, hey, if you want help seeing this the right way, he says this in verse 5. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. You should ask God. He gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. He says, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. He says, that person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all their ways, right, in all they do. Here's the idea. James is like, hey, I get it. It's not natural to look at tough situations and say, I'm going to consider this joy because I know God is going to pull good out of bad to make me different. That's what he's doing. He's going to say, I know you're going to need help to see that. So if you need wisdom seeing this differently, here's all you have to do. You just ask God. And you need to know that God is going to give you that kind of wisdom. Don't doubt, right? Don't waver. He wants you to have wisdom more than you want wisdom. He wants you to have this perspective more than you do. And so we might start to ask the question, right? I want to start to ask questions differently around this, rather than asking, why me? How long do I have to be in this? Why does somebody else have to have an easy way and I have to have a hard way? Right? Rather than having these red line kind of questions, we can start to recognize some different things and ask some different questions. Right? I might have to recognize some of this is a bit of an obligation. I might have to be in this for a while. There might be a reality that I have to accept that this is kind of happening to me, but I don't want to live here, right? I want to recognize this is hard. I go to God for comfort, and I see some of that, and then I want to ask a better set of questions, and I want to ask this: God, is there opportunity here? Is there opportunity here? Here might be the way we think of it. If I'm going to suffer and I'm going to go through difficulty, I might as well find a way to benefit from it. I might as well find a way to grow through this because I'm in it anyway. Me thinking that I can break this and get out of it or feel pity about for it, that doesn't help me or serve me in any way, just often elongates suffering. Is there opportunity? Here's another question. Is there something that I can learn from this? Is there some part of my heart that God is trying to get to in the middle of this? That 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road or even a month down the road, I might look back and say, man, this thing that I thought was a bit of a death sentence was actually an opportunity for me to be set free. Guys, I hear you, and I know that as we're talking about this, that there's a reality to how difficult life can be, right? And the trials of many kinds can be everything from the severe trial that kind of alters my life to I'm stuck in a traffic jam, right? It's everything in between. Here's the thing: when we read these verses, consider it pure joy when we're in the midst of the many trials. Listen. This verse and verses like this, these are not verses that we quote to people in our lives who are in the middle of suffering. Okay? When somebody's life is wrecked, we're not like, you know what you should do? Consider that pure joy, brother. Okay? We're not doing that. We're not giving the cliche coffee mug right here. Here's a great perspective to you. The Bible says this: when somebody's in the midst of severe suffering and they're in the middle of the heat of the difficulty that's really life-altering, what you should do is mourn with those who mourn. Sit with them. Close your mouth and just show up. That's like the best you can do. So this isn't about that. It's not ignoring the reality that life can be very, very, very challenging, very overwhelming. And if I'm in that situation, what I want to do is I want to bring this hard to the Lord, right? The Lord is in all of this, right? He's in the midst of my difficulty and my suffering of that difficulty. He's also going to bring out the benefit on the other side. And often if it's a big deal, I might live here for a while before I find myself landing over here. If the run-of-the-mill, day in and day out difficulties will probably go a little faster. I might be able to kind of skip a bunch of this, right? You get stuck in traffic, you don't need to mourn, okay? You need to be like, hey, Lord, help me get perspective and move on, right? Find some quick perspective on it. But I might ask, in all of this, Lord, are you trying to teach me to trust you, right, in the midst of this? What do you want me to learn? What opportunity are you opening up? Is it possible that this isn't just happening to me, this is happening for me? And here's the thing, when I find my way through this conversation, I can start to see joy pop. Because here's the thing, guys, there are followers of Jesus that have been doing this for centuries, for millennia. Followers of Christ have had their property confiscated. They've been in the midst of plagues. They've been persecuted. They've been rejected. They've been martyred. They've been beheaded. Listen to Paul's list all throughout the Bible. He's like, I've been beaten multiple times. I spent a night and day floating in the middle of the sea. I'm like, man, my internet went out. I'm going to lose my mind, right? Here's the thing. There's a skill around this. And this is what James is starting the whole conversation with. He's like, hey, I know it's hard. I know it's hard. Get some wisdom. Find your way to this. It can take a while. Ask the Lord to help you with it. But if you want to find joy, I gotta see this side of the equation, and I probably, if this is severe, I probably need this piece too. I probably need the Lord to help me in the difficult and find comfort so that I can trust that He's good. When I'm here, I can find a resilience in life. Joy makes us strong. So when I can begin to know this thing that I hate being in the middle of, man, it's teaching me something. When I can find something to thank God for in the midst of it, right? Over and over and over again, more often than not, we're going to have some version of this word in our life. Something that if we got to pick it, we would just want to make it go away, delete. If I could erase it off the board, I would. Guys, this side of heaven, that's not how it is. So what do we want to do? What do we want to do about it? I can feel terrible or imagine that it's going to go away or pretend that it doesn't hurt. And I can find a way to break out of this cycle, be honest about the difficulty, and find the good that God is trying to open up. Because of His goodness, He's always going to give His children opportunities to grow, to mature, to become different. And when we look at Jesus face to face, this is what's going to matter. Right? Just like those boys who are now men, as they received their dream of playing college ball, right? At a micro level, they look at that prize. If they were honest, they could look all the way back to Gauntlet and see the connection. Those days of training and difficulty and throwing up, they all added up and they equaled this opportunity. For us as followers of Jesus, if you're a follower of Christ today, this is what James says right later in the passage here in verse 12. He says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial. Because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him." There's a day coming, hear me, when all of this will go away. This is temporary. This is not going to last forever. And I know that if you're in the middle of it right now, that's only so helpful. I know. Just stay with me. And I have to know that this doesn't last forever. The sickness goes away, the stress goes away, the division goes away, the politics go away. It all is going to go away one day. The only time that I have to trust God and choose Him and grow into a person that looks like the person of Jesus is this time. And it's like my buddy Aaron said, when we allow that to happen, when the world around us can see that we are marked by joy, not faking it joy, real, gritty, through sometimes the tears joy, when people can look at our lives and say, I don't know how you found that, man. That's different. That's supernatural. People don't get that. And we look and say, yeah, that's a no-brainer moment. That's a moment where I can point and say, without the Lord, I would not be able to have this. And people can get drawn out of the pit with us because of the joy that is found within us. Jesus took all of the difficulties on himself. The difficulties of the world, the sin of the world, the shame of the world, the guilt of, he bore it all. And he bore it all for your good and my good. And now, as we live life, we do a version, a micro version, a fraction of what Jesus does. We live in the midst of difficulty as we grow into what God has called us and made us to be. God is raising up men and women who are marked like this, who are changed like this. And guys, I know that we need this conversation and this call to endurance because sometimes it gets overwhelming. I remember we had 4 kids in 5 years. I know. It's a lot. It's a lot. And when our kids were all super small and nobody could do anything yet, it was very taxing, right? Nobody slept. We were all kind of losing it a little bit, right? It was we were like on the edge. And I remember being super stressed out and frustrated with some things. I was at this family gathering, and we were at this Chinese restaurant. And I was up in one of those buffets, I was scooping my General Tso's. And I was thinking to myself, I looked out the back door, right into the kitchen. And I just thought I could run away. Right? I could just leave, take my egg rolls and go, But I was serious. There's a moment, right? I didn't do it, but there's a moment I thought, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Guys, listen. All of us hit this moment where we ask ourselves, can I keep doing this? I know you think that, because I think it, and we all do. We're all the same. If you haven't hit one recently, it's coming. Or you might be in the middle of it right now where you're like, I don't know if I can stay on. How much more difficulty can I handle? And you're like me, and you want to run out the back door. Hear me. Here's what God is doing in you right now. He's doing it right now. He's building endurance in his servant. And if you don't know him yet, what he's doing is, like in Aaron's life, he's detaching you from the things of this world to lift you up and call you to himself. And he's doing that for love. You hear it? There's no other way. There's no other way I'm going to grow or move or change into the person that God's making me to be unless this is here. So here's the call. Hang on. Hang on. Do not relent. Don't cave in. Don't leave. Don't quit. The harvest is coming. The crown of life is coming. And one day we're going to look at the Lord, and he's going to look at you, and he's going to give you the crown of life. Better than any prize I can ever imagine. I can't even fathom what that's going to feel like to have the one who beat death look at me and give me a crown. Guys, I don't know about you. I got to stare at that sometimes. Because if I'm honest, I lose sight of this. All of it. Just like you, I just get sucked in, and I just want the thing to change, and I want this to be. And I got to zoom out and realize there are things happening in me that God is trying to do right now. So here's the question. What trial are you in the middle of today? In your own heart and mind, what is it? What's the thing that you just, if you could just snap your fingers and make it change, you would? Are you being honest with that? Bring it to the Lord that that's where you are. Lord, I need help with it. I need your comfort with it. And I need you to, God, would you give me wisdom? Would you help me to see that there might be some things to learn here. Would you even give me some joy as I start to see just the sprinkle of those, just little fragments of little places where you're already working. God, would you give me joy and make me strong so that I don't quit and I don't cave? Lord, would you help me? Guys, can we come to God with that heart and mind? And just like the believers 2,000 years ago that James was talking about, we're the same. I need endurance. I need a God who will meet me in the thick of it and show me where to find the joy. I want to say thank you, even in the midst of the searing pain. Guys, as the band comes out, I want to do this together as we worship. From the heart, can we start to grab a hold of the joy? Even if it's in the midst of tears. Because we have a God that is good and he will waste nothing because of his great love for us. Would you bow your heads, close your eyes as we sing and worship together? Lord, you're the only one that really knows all of it. You know every burden that we carry, every minute of sleep lost. God, you know all the struggles. And God, we praise you that we can bring every single one directly to you. And know that you see, you understand, and you get it. Even if nobody else does. God, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to see how you are changing us right now. God, the growth is happening as we speak, in the midst of the struggle. That we might be different kinds of people 5 or 10 years from now. Lord, you're making us into people that are more like Jesus. And one day, Jesus, we're going to see you face to face. Lord, would you burn within us the reality of that day? When all of the struggle is ended, all the challenges died away, and we get to receive the reward. The reward that only you really deserve. Lord, would you meet us in the middle of this? Help us with it. Meet us even now. It's in Christ we pray.